Hall & Wilcox acknowledges the traditional custodians of the lands on which this podcast is recorded. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and to all First Nations people joining us today.
Welcome all, and thank you for joining us to experience another Hall & Wilcox Private Client podcast. It's really great to have you with us again. In this series, we're focusing on giving and the ways in which it's possible to have an impact in our communities by contributing during our lifetimes and creating a legacy on death. And today, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Carly Severino. Now, Carly is Director of Community at Australian Communities Foundation, leading the fund and client services team, overseeing every aspect of the experience of giving for donors and clients. Carly is a really experienced supporter of philanthropy, having spent the last 20 years working in corporate roles, not-for-profit and tertiary organisations, focusing on giving and intergenerational wealth transfer. Now, Carly, we might come back to different aspects of your past experience, but maybe we can start by looking at the present. Tell me a bit about your current role and Australian Communities Foundation.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Emma. It's an absolute pleasure to be the Director of Community at Australian Communities Foundation. We are Australia's largest community of everyday philanthropists, and it's something we're really proud of. And we are also Australia's only national community foundation. And community foundations is a model of giving that's recognised across the world and is growing in strength in Australia at the moment. Certainly in other countries like the US and in New Zealand, it's a really strong part of their giving culture. And we're seeing the rise of that in Australia. There's about 50 community foundations across the country now, and that's really growing. We've been around for 27 years as Australian Communities Foundation. We began as the Melbourne Community Foundation and then realised that there was a real place in our country for a national remit, bringing people together to give together and understand the power and the joy of collective giving, regardless of the amount that you might be able to give or the causes that you're interested in. And so Australian Communities Foundation, we look after about over 600 sub-funds, and there's lots of jargon in this space, which I'm sure you know and which your listeners are probably aware of or getting used to. But a sub-fund is like a small tailored foundation, and we have them for not-for-profits, we have them for corporates, and we have them for families and individuals. And we also have a number of giving or collective giving circles, which we look after as well. So these 600 funds sit in our structure, and we help them by investing the money that comes into the fund. And that's 100% responsibly invested, and I can talk a bit more about that if you like. We then help people and organisations decide how they want to give, how much, how often, what kind of focus, what's the change they want to see in the world, and what's the best way to go about that from a giving or philanthropic perspective. And one of the things, as Director of Community, obviously I think our superpower is community. And so that's all about bringing our donors and supporters together regularly in lots of different ways, in person across the country, online, providing educational opportunities, providing opportunities to give together, to learn together, and to power giving more individually and together.
Thanks, Carly. I think that's a really great summary of ACF and the last 27 years of growth and expansion and opportunity to give into our communities that organisation has afforded lots and lots of people, and now 600 sub-funds is quite the number. So you mentioned there about there's a range of givers, so donors, people in corporate, people in not-for-profits, but also obviously individuals as well. So from an accessibility point of view, people often think that you need to have lots and lots of money in order to start giving in a way, for example, having a sub-fund with yourselves. Is that the case for ACF?
Not at all. And part of our reason for being is to democratise structured giving, to make it as accessible as we can right across Australia. And so for us, the minimum starting point is $10,000. And once you have $10,000 in a fund, you can start doing grant making. We have funds that have $10,000 in them, and we have funds that have $20 million in them, and everything in between. And we can really tailor the experience and our service to whatever you have to give and how you want to give it. We also even have an entry level opportunity, which we call a gumnut, which is about growing a giving account or a sub fund with us. So in that case, you only need to commit to putting in $2,000 each year. And then once you've grown it to a balance of $10,000, then you can start grant making. So I think that works out at like $170 a month or something like that. So we try to do as much as we can to make structured giving as accessible as possible, because the Australian community is generous. When there's a fire or a flood or those kind of things, or a neighbour in trouble, Australians are incredibly generous, but it's often quite reactive. And so what we're trying to do is help Australia understand the power and benefit of structuring giving. And so we want to make it as accessible as we can.
Thanks, Carly. Just want to pick up on another word that you used in your opening description of ACF and your role there is joy. So joy and giving is something that perhaps people don't often necessarily put together. They might see giving and the word philanthropy as something quite somber and quite worthy, but it can be an absolute joyous and fun thing to see impact in community. And obviously the benefit of ACF is that you are able to manage the administrative and the operational aspects so that people who are giving can focus on the joy.
Absolutely. And it's something that people often don't understand, particularly when you might have more money to give. There's an inclination to set up a PAF, there's another bit of jargon, or other kinds of structures. And they come, because of the tax implications, they come with an incredible amount of governance and administration, which some people are totally up for and thoroughly enjoy and don't mind having oversight of. And for other people, that's not the great part of giving or structuring giving. And so we absolutely try to set up our sub funds so that we have experts who really enjoy governance, administration, all those things, so that our donors and clients can absolutely experience the power and the joy of giving. And it can be incredibly joyful regardless of how much you have to give. Very often our donors feel a part of something bigger, and there's a real strength in that. And I think, there's lots of research to show that when you connect to something bigger, that has all kinds of benefits for people. And it might be contributing $500 a year to help feed families who are struggling with food supply, or it might be really cutting edge climate initiatives, or the one of the great joys is that you can find there's something for everyone. So regardless of what your area of passion is or interest, it could be crafts, it could be animals, it could be family, it could be democracy. There's all kinds of things. And the other great joy that I think often people don't think about when they start giving is the absolute pleasure of sharing it with others. And so we see the vast majority of the funds that we look after are set up by families and individuals. And one of the great joys that they experience is when they bring children and grandchildren or extended family on the journey of their giving. And it's often not why they start doing it in a structured way. It might be because they feel incredibly lucky for the life they've had, or they might have a business or something where there's a liquidity event. So there might be a reason to set it up, which has nothing to do with involving the broader family and children and grandchildren. But the absolute joy of having some of those conversations about what matters, about what the family values, and then finding different opportunities, whether that's saying to the grandkids, you have $500 between the four of you, find something you care about and then tell us what it is and we'll help you make the donation. Or whether it's sitting around the table over summer holidays as a broader family and having some conversations about what matters to you and how you might want to give. There's a lot of joy in that, which is like an added bonus on top of helping society change in the way you think it needs to.
Yeah, that's right, Carly. I mean, all kinds of benefit, as you say. I'm going to have to express a connection here, to declare a connection to ACF. So myself, I was a member of the board of trustees at ACF for 9 years, having retired a few years ago now. And in addition, I did start with a gumnut, just like you said, the entry-level fund. And part of the reason why I did that was to engage my own children in giving and to get them to get a better understanding of what impact is and what impact can be achieved by small levels of giving and into the communities and in areas that they are interested in understand. The other, I suppose, side benefit that is also to give them a bit of an education outside necessarily the giving, but also understanding things like investment and how that works. And you'd mentioned before about responsible investment. So that's a phrase that I had to explain to them so that they understand what that means in the context of the way in which ACF looks after the fund's money.
Absolutely. And I'm the same, Emma. I've set up a gumnut fund and my kids are starting to understand that. My eldest daughter, when she turned 19, she received some money from family as part of her birthday and she opted to put half of it into the gumnut, which was a great moment.
That's a huge success.
For me, really exciting. And yes, to have all those, to show them a fund statement once a year and help them learn to understand profit and loss. Concepts like compounding interest, which isn't that exciting, but is an important thing to understand in our society, can be more meaningful when you have some of these things to talk to it about and give it a context. And, I had a chat with because my kids wanted to understand, why wouldn't we just give the money now to an organisation and let it spend the money? And so we had that conversation about, well, we could give $1 million. I wish we could give $1 million, but let's pick a number. We could give $1 million now and the organisation could spend that. They might build a building or something. Great, that's a good impact. But then we're done. If we put the $1 million into, for example, an ACF sub-fund, Australian Communities Foundation sub-fund, and we invested that $1 million, we could give $50,000 per annum. And in 20 years, we would have given $1 million, but we'd still have $1 million in the sub-fund. So that really starts you thinking, when you haven't thought about those things before, about the power of structuring it and investment. And as you said, responsible investment is something that's growing in all aspects of financial services and investing. And so to have a conversation about, where are we happy to make the money? What does it do? If you're not prepared to invest in certain things because you don't think they're good for our world, do you have to discount the money you earn? And Australian Communities Foundation is 100% responsibly invested, as I said, and we've been on a journey since about 2015 to make that happen. And our experience is there's no ethical discount. You don't have to earn less to invest in a positive way for the world. And so that's a really interesting and important conversation and learning to have as well.
Yeah, thanks, Carly. I think conversations around giving and conversations of all aspects of giving have got to start somewhere. And sometimes people get going because they're prompted by individual curiosity, or they've been encouraged by family or friends, and they come across organisations like yourselves, or prompted and reactive, as you suggested, about major events in our communities or globally to do something. I think professional advisors also have a significant role in helping people navigate the options, but sometimes perhaps they're hesitant in themselves because they're not sure where to start. What do you think? What do you think? Where do you think they should start? What's the best way to start a conversation around giving or structured giving?
Well, I think there's a really good opportunity just start by asking what's already happening. Do you make any donations? Do you have any connections to charity? Because lots of Australians do already. It might be that they're funding a few friends to do some long walks to raise money for something, and they contribute $20 here or 50 there. There's other people who have charities that they've been connected with a long time, perhaps because of a childhood illness or a personal experience. There's lots of different ways in which people are connected to charities and causes. So actually, it's a much easier conversation to start than we sometimes think. And then the power for a professional advisor, I think, is to be able to provide some professional support and the ability to open people's eyes to what's possible if you go beyond the kind of reactive giving that a lot of us do. And we work with lots of professional advisors, lawyers, accountants, wealth managers, financial planners, and we say it's really about flexibility. So each of those professions have to be real experts in their area. And so what we can do is bring the philanthropy expertise in a way that makes sense for them and their organisations. So for some professional advisors, when they have that conversation with their clients, and they can tell there's an interest in doing something more or structuring, they say, great, here's Australian Communities Foundation, they can help you. And so it's a sort of referral partner situation. For other professional advisors, they're really keen to maintain the relationship themselves. And so then we do the behind the scenes, we can white label things and sort of offer it in that way. So it's very much about being flexible and helping professional advisors maintain the relationship, because one of the things that the research shows globally is that this is an area of professional servicing which really grows relationship and understanding between an advisor and their clients and future clients. So it really is powerful for everyone.
So it's a benefit to obviously to the client who gets that opportunity to be assisted in giving in the way that they want to give. Great benefit to the advisor because it enhances the relationship with the client, and obviously the overall outcome is that the community gets an opportunity to benefit. So excellent. Now, Carly, as you know, I spend a large portion of my time assisting people to put in place wills and comprehensive estate plans to ensure that their wishes are implemented on their death. Statistical information seems to show that a surprisingly large number of people do not have an up-to-date will or any will at all in some cases. And also, it's surprising in a country which, as you said, is often said to be generous or seen to be generous in times of need, is that less than 10% of people who put in place a will have any sort of gift to charity or not-for-profit organisation within that will. So a really tiny proportion of people who even get around to doing a will are giving on their death. And in this country, we're like any developed country, we're seeing a huge transition of wealth from generation to generation in the coming decade. So there's lots of opportunity for people to give consideration to this. Why do you think it is in Australia that we don't have this sort of strong culture of giving in this way, leaving bequests?
To be honest, Emma, I don't know why, because because I think in living, as you said, we have a reputation for being fairly generous. And so I don't know whether it's because we don't like to talk about it. So nobody.
Yeah, there's definitely no one likes talking about death and money, and we're asking them to do the same altogether.
To do both.
Yeah.
And I think there's been a strong sense here, probably elsewhere as well, but certainly in Australia, that wills and those kind of things are about looking after family first. And I still absolutely think that's the case. But I do think, as you mentioned, there is an incredible wealth transfer happening and will be happening for some time to come. And the people who are looking at wills in particular at the moment, that demographic and age group, have an awful lot of wealth that they might not realise till their passing, houses and things like that, which so it means they can't give as much as they might during their lifetime. So to me, it just seems like such an amazing opportunity to still look after family and people you care about, but also to think about some change or care you might like to give to the broader community that perhaps you haven't been able to in your lifetime.
Yeah, so I suppose we just got to keep continuing to have conversations and encourage it to be had in the open and to be normalised, I suppose. Perhaps then we'll see greater cultural change, and that number of 10% can be up considerably in the coming years. Thank you, Carly, again for taking the time to speak to me today. As I mentioned before, I've got a connection with ACF, and Hall & Wilcox also has a connection with ACF as a sub-fund holder for our organisation. So I would encourage listeners to take a look at Australian Communities Foundation website and the opportunities to give through the sub-fund structure, but also all of the other opportunities to be assisted in giving that are available through ACF. Details will be included in the show notes for this session. So thanks again, Carly, and thanks, listeners, and we look forward to you joining us again soon.
Thanks for having me, Emma.
This podcast is not legal advice and should not be relied upon as such. You should always obtain legal advice about your specific circumstances.